like I said, after I was done with the blame game and it was all his fault, and I had nothing to do with it, and I did everything I could to save this marriage. When I was when the divorce was final and I started to rebuild my life, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted, but I knew what I didn't want.
Welcome to Coaches on the Couch, the place where experts share their journey and inspire you to take action. My name is Pratishtha Bhalla. I am the founder and creator of Anxiety Free Leader and Coaches on the Couch. Today we have with us a very special guest. Her name is Alexandra Neil. She is a certified high performance coach. She was working for corporates and traveling across the globe, including the Caribbean, France, Brazil, Netherlands, Singapore, China, to name a few. It was her divorce with her husband of 11 years that got her to pause and reflect on her life. And this is the time she was introduced to coaching, and she never looked back. Today, she is following her passion and coaching women to break through their inner glass ceilings. Join us as she shares with us her journey and also some insights on how to take ownership of your life. So make sure you stay with us till the end and subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss updates, because every week we bring in experts who can inspire you. A very warm welcome, Alex, to Coaches on the Couch.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Thank you, Alex. And Alex, let's start with, when you say take ownership, what does that mean?
Taking ownership is basically taking responsibility for ourselves. We have the opportunity as we live our life on the daily to either feel like we're a victim of what is going on in the world around us and that we're suffering from what befalls us. But in fact, we actually have a lot more opportunity to take control, not necessarily of the events that are going on around us, but really taking ownership of who we are and how we want to respond to what is going on around us. So there are obviously circumstances where that can be more difficult and more challenging than others. But for the most part, when something happens in our life, we have a choice and we can say, I'm not letting this moment define me in a negative way, or woe is me, poor me, how can this be happening to me? So depending on which of those two approaches you take, your life can be more full of difficulties or it can be more full of joy. And that's what I mean when I talk about taking ownership, is really being able to proactively and in a positive way respond to the events that are going on in our life, instead of feeling like we're falling victim to what is happening to us, so to speak.
Mm. Alex, as you were saying this, it reminded me of someone who was constantly blaming her ex. And it was very difficult for her to accept what had happened to her.
Mm.
Um, I think she was not able to forgive herself for what was happening. So in that case, even the idea of taking ownership like looked like alien to her. For such a
Mm.
person, how can they move on to acceptance and take ownership?
I would say the first thing is to be gentle with ourselves. We are probably our own toughest critic, right? I remember when I was in corporate, and if I made a mistake, and you could, I would get called into my boss's office, and you'd get a talking to, but it was never as bad as anything that I said that I said to myself, because I was already beating myself up more than the person could possibly beat me up for. So I think recognizing that we are humans and we make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes, and that through that forgiving of ourselves, because sometimes we make mistakes because we don't know any better, right? and we don't have all of the information, or things change and we need to adjust. So I think being able to be kind to ourselves and understand that we are imperfect, we make sometimes imperfect decisions, and then the key though is not to stay there. The key is to say, okay, did not go the way I wanted it to go. There's no sense in beating myself up, because beating yourself up doesn't solve anything. It doesn't, what it does, it keeps you in the past. And what we want to do is we want to keep moving forward. So forgiving what we have, what we have done, because we did what we felt was best at the time that we did it, but then learning from the experience and then taking that information to move ourselves forward, I would say, is how I would approach it. And I'll tell you honestly, I went through a very similar situation. I was divorced from my husband about 11 or 12 years ago. And in the beginning, it was all his fault. I did nothing wrong and it was all his fault. And then I was like, well, there were two people in this relationship, right? And so maybe I need to go back and I need to look at what my role was in this whole thing. And I think that's when the journey starts, that growth journey of making sure that we don't make the same mistakes again starts by looking at what we've done, and then how do we then move forward so that we don't repeat the same patterns and we don't do the same things we've done before.
Yeah, you said not repeating the same patterns, but often it is like I've seen people who get divorced once often end up with a similar partner whom they divorced,
Mhm.
and like the cycle continues. Is this like really true, and how do you break the pattern?
So I do believe that things happen in our life for a reason, and that there is a lesson for us to learn. And that, I don't know if you've heard this before, but I know I have. Things continue to happen in our lives until we've learned a lesson that is there for us to learn, and then we can move on. But I think the way that you break the pattern is by going inside and learning more about yourself, learning what are the things that are attracting you to this particular person. Are they healthy? Are they not healthy? Is it something that you're doing because that's what you saw happen in the environment around you? And is there an opportunity for you to then take a step back and say, okay, if this keeps happening and I don't like it, what do I need to change within me? What do I need to do in a different way that is going to help me to transcend that and to get beyond this thing that keeps happening? Because if we don't change anything, the pattern is going to repeat itself. But you have to have enough self-awareness to understand what our own role is in this thing. And it also goes back to taking ownership, if because you have to be willing, once you know, to make the change. Because once you're aware of something, if you don't change and it's not something you like, then you actually are making a conscious choice to continue in that vein, to continue the behavior, to continue accepting the things in our lives that we are hoping to change. So it's taking ownership, learning, and doing our own work, understanding what are the traumas that we keep bringing back into our life, getting rid of those, and then moving forward.
Yeah, Alex, I did heard about it that if we don't learn the lessons, it keeps repeating. So when you said that, I remember when I was talking to my mom and telling her this a few days back. So that's interesting. But what most people think is they think that why should only I change when it is not my mistake?
It's it may not be the person's mistake, but we also have a responsibility in terms of what we accept in our life and what we don't accept in our life. So if somebody continuously, and I'm going to use a really extreme example, but say somebody is verbally abusive. And I know there is some psychology and I know there's trauma usually behind something like that. However, I think there's an opportunity when we see something and we have something in our life that we don't like, we have a responsibility to ourselves to change that. And yes, it may not be my mistake, right? That somebody is verbally abusing me. It's not my mistake. I haven't done anything to really deserve that, but I have a choice whether or not I stay and I accept it or I do something different.
Alexandra, but some people sometimes, when they are in this sometimes dysfunctional marriage or dysfunctional family situations, also, where they are stuck with someone who is verbally abusive, but they don't have a choice. Maybe because they are not financially independent, maybe they are not in that age that they can take independent decisions. So, within that environment, is there a possibility that they can still remain calm and have power not to get impacted? Because if somebody is shouting and somebody is abusive, sometimes it becomes too much in the real scenario.
Hmm. Well, I think there are a couple of things. I think that we can, and this is a tough, kind of a tough situation to be in. But again, I think in terms of not being impacted, is there an opportunity or an option to walk away from the discussion? And if there is, I would absolutely take that. But I also think that we have people around us for a reason. And maybe the opportunity is there to create a support system that can help to manage situations like this, that can help to provide answers when there are questions, that can help to provide a roadmap for support and for knowing what options are there. And I know it doesn't work in every situation. I totally understand that. Um, but I think for the most part, there is an opportunity to seek help. And I would absolutely encourage anyone who's facing a situation like that to do exactly that and to seek support and to seek help. Um, and then feeling the impact, it's a little more difficult, right? When you have somebody who's yelling at you, it's hard not to feel like it's your fault and that you've done something to deserve it. And in the moment, we have to take that and we have to digest it. But I also think that when we have those moments when we're more calm and we can objectively look at a situation, then we have an opportunity to reflect and try to put some things in place that can help for ourselves not to be impacted as much. Because at the end of the day, generally what I've seen is when people get mad, it's because they're fighting their own insecurities. And their fear coming across as being inadequate or whatever else could be going their way. So that impact, I think, in the moment is not so easy because we have all these emotions that we're dealing with. I think it's more after the fact, trying to figure out, okay, next time this happens, is there a way that I can manage that for myself in a different way?
I really got interested in this point that people who are shouting, sometimes they're having their own fights within themselves. But some people, they manage to just put it on other people, on the victim, you can say here in this case. Maybe victim is not the right word, but in the situation, if that
On the
person
other
is a
person,
victim.
yeah.
Yeah, so but the victim then also feels that, oh, what will happen if other people are also blaming me? So that one victim is fighting a war not only with the abuser but with the society or the people around. In that situation, how can he objectively think, or he or she can objectively think, take a step back, and then seek support, like you said, or do something which can help them take the power?
I think when you know who you are, you know what you accept and what you don't accept, when you know what your boundaries are, um, it's a lot easier to do that, because at the end of the day, everybody has their own perception. I have my perception. Other people around me have their own perception. And the the way to, for me, not to be impacted so much by everybody else's perception is to be really strong in terms of what, for me, what I believe in, what I accept, what I choose not to accept, having those boundaries. Um, and at the end of the day, trying to think less about what other people think of me, because at the end of the day, it's my life. I have I have to live it. I have to walk in my shoes every single day. And when people talk about other people or they blame other people, it's like throwing a grenade, right? You throw a grenade, it lands, it explodes, it does a lot of damage, but the person who threw the grenade is very far away, so it doesn't impact them. So the question is, how or do you want to allow that kind of damage to come into your life simply because somebody felt like they wanted to throw a grenade? And you don't. You don't.
Yeah. um, so how can they create boundaries and like know who they are? Because I think a lot of people who don't know about coaching or have never worked in this space, first they don't know themselves. So how do they get introduced to themselves and create those boundaries? Like if you have to give some tips to them.
Mm. So I would say the first thing, in terms of creating boundaries, is being super clear about who you are. Who are you as a person? What are your values? What do you want to live by? What are the things you want? Because once you know who you are and you know what you are willing to accept in your life, it's very easy to then just to say, um, this I won't accept. And all they have to do is set that line in the sand and set that boundary. I think one of the things that people often do, and I've done myself as a recovering people pleaser, is that I set a boundary, but then when people cross it, I don't necessarily go back and I don't challenge them, right? And part of setting the boundary is to be able to go back and to say, no, this is where the line is, and you can't cross it. There are consequences, or I won't tolerate that line being crossed. But it's difficult to set that line in the sand until you know who you are and what you want. And those are not easy things, easy things to know always. It takes a lot of introspection. It takes understanding, how do I want to show up in the world? What kind of mark do I want to leave? What kind of impact? How do I want to engage with the people around me? So having that clarity, I think for me, is absolutely fundamental, right? Because it's like having a goal. If you have, or it's like, I would say, not having a goal. If you say, I want to be successful, but you're really nebulous about what success means, how do you know when you reach it, right? You don't have, if you don't have that clarity, it's difficult to know what path you should take. Whereas if you say, I don't know, I want to be a business owner who dives into this industry and is successful, and it's going to be measured in XYZ, that's a lot easier because you have something much more specific that you're targeting. And the same thing goes with our personal clarity. When we know who we are and we know what we want, it's a lot easier to set those boundaries.
Yeah, so we need to start with knowing who we are, our values, our beliefs, things we live by. So, Alex, share with us your story. Like you told a lot about yourself in the form, but can you share with the audience here what happened after you went through that divorce?
So, like I said, after I was done with the blame game and it was all his fault, and I had nothing to do with it, and I did everything I could to save this marriage. I knew that, and going back to the whole clarity thing, when the divorce was final and I started to rebuild my life, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted, but I knew what I didn't want. And what I didn't want is what actually started my journey into, well, if you don't want this, then what do you want? How do you want to show up? Because I didn't want to end up in another relationship where I was going to make the same mistakes because I knew the result was going to be the same. So that's actually what started my journey into personal development. And I got in touch with, I learned about Tony Robbins, I learned about Brendon Burchard, all of those guys. And I started, attending seminars and things like that. And through one of those seminars, so in the meantime, before attending the seminars, I had already started some of my own work, and there were a number of books that were absolutely life-changing for me. And through those were the books that kind of started my journey into trying to figure out who do I want to be and what do I want in my life. And over the years, I started diving deeper. I went to a Tony Robbins seminar. I ended up attending a couple of different events from Brendon Burchard. And at one of Brendon's events, he was talking about his certified high performance coaching. And I was like, oh my God, I've been waiting for this my whole life. I was out the door with the credit card in my hand before he was even done talking. And so I've been certified for about 6 years now. And I was trying to do both my corporate job and my coaching at the same time. And I could never manage to find the right balance between the two. And in December of 2020, a good friend of mine who was also a coach, she was living the life that I always envisioned I would live when I grew up and I became a coach. And she was a public speaker. She was impacting women everywhere. She was a book writer. And unfortunately, she passed away of a brain aneurysm in her sleep, and she was my age. And that was my wake-up call in terms of making that transition fully from being in corporate and having this little thing on the side that I was trying to grow, to saying goodbye to corporate after 30 years, not an easy thing to do, and then fully stepping into this whole coaching environment, this whole coaching arena, which was and has been super satisfying and fulfilling. And to know that I'm making a difference in women's lives is incredibly satisfying.
Wow, that was a journey.
It was a journey.
Yeah, because I think even leaving a corporate job, I left it not, I didn't took 30 years, I left it in like 8 or 10. But
Okay.
it was difficult. It was difficult. And leaving after 30 years, when you have achieved a point, I think it would have been very difficult. That
It was
security.
and that was the big thing, because one of my human drives is certainty. And that is one of the, I would say, quote unquote, benefits of corporate, is that you have that certainty of having that paycheck coming in every month, right?
Yeah.
But when you think about it, if tomorrow the company decides they no longer need you, there is no more security, there is no more certainty, because you find yourself out of a job. And so I needed to find security and certainty in a different way. And for me, that way was to build a coaching business that I was fully responsible for. Fail or succeed, it was me, right? And I had that control, instead of somebody else having the control over my livelihood and over how far I can go, how much I can grow, what successes I'm going to have. I get to decide all that for myself now, which is awesome.
That's interesting, Alex, because you chose this topic of taking control of your life. And as we discussed, I am noticing you have controlled your life. Like you have started taking control over your life for all areas, including your career. I think that is where I'm bringing those stories out, where people are sharing how they are actually doing it. It's not theory. So you are actually doing it. You are not telling us the theory or why it is important, but how you have actually implemented it. So thank you
Yeah,
so much for sharing that story.
you're welcome.
Alexandra, what would be your 3 tips to someone who has to start taking control of their life?
So, 3 tips. Number one, and I said it before and I'm going to say it again, be very clear about what you want. Because until you know that, the wind can take you anywhere, right? It's like being on a sail ship and you don't have the thing in the back, to kind of direct yourself. If you don't know where you're going, if you don't have an end point, you don't know how to get there. So be really clear about what you want and who you are. The second thing I would say is, don't be afraid to make mistakes. And that, in all honesty, is still something I struggle with, because I don't like making mistakes. I don't like how I feel when I make mistakes. But at the same time, when you do something right, you don't really learn. But when you make mistakes, you're like, dang, I got to figure out how not to do that again. So, look at mistakes as opportunities for growth, opportunities to learn, and be humble enough to make those changes and put those things into action in in your life. Because to learn something and not do anything with it, it's kind of what's the point. It's a bit of a waste, so to speak. But if you take something, you learn it, you put it in action in your life, and you see yourself moving forward, and you see yourself kind of advancing towards the goals that you have and the life that you want to live, that is super, super powerful because it helps to keep you motivated, right? You make a change, you see the benefit. Oh, maybe I can make more changes, and it snowballs, right? Because when you start making changes and you make mistakes, but you learn from those mistakes, you start to get more comfortable with making mistakes, and you're more willing to take a risk because you know you're going to figure it out. You know you're going to find a way out of it. You're going to find something that's going to propel you forward. So get clarity. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. And then the other thing is, I would say the third one would be surround yourself with people that can support you on your journey, because seldom do we do something by ourselves. We can go further by having the right people in our circle, whether it's somebody who's going to introduce you to somebody that can help you, whether it's somebody who happens to be available one day, you're having a really bad day and you just need to talk to someone, and somebody that's going to either ask you questions or be able to commiserate with you and just hold your hand if you're really having a bad day. Having the right people around you that elevate you and that give you the strength to keep moving forward is really, really important. I'm sure you've heard the saying, you are the sum of the five people that you hang out with. And if you want to grow, but you hang out with people who are not interested in that, chances are you're going to start to lose interest. Whereas if you hang out with people that are one or two steps ahead in their journey, they can actually pull you along, and it can be extremely powerful to get you to the place where you want to be even faster. So I would say clarity, mistakes are okay, right? It's just forgive yourself and learn from the mistakes, and then just make sure you have the right people in your corner that are going to support you in the journey.
I think all three are so amazing tips that you have shared. And one thing that stuck to me about making mistakes, because sometimes, I'm not saying it's always gender biased, but sometimes my father used to tell me, as a girl, don't make many mistakes. You will not be forgiven. Is it like, is it like, just my like so my experience, or does it happen? I'm not very sure, but sometimes we are told that don't make mistakes as a child, and then we are scared. As you said, you also said that I don't like making mistakes. So so if you are still ready to make mistakes and then you appear foolish because once you make mistake, you do feel like, oh, was I foolish at that time? How do you recover? How do you bounce back?
I think we all bounce back from a lot of different things, right? We make mistakes all the time. I'm sure, little ones, big ones. But there's a difference between making a mistake and judging yourself for it, where you start going down the spiral of, how could I be so stupid? Oh my God, how can I do such a, idiotic, and you start going down. All of that's part of the fixed mindset, and the fixed mindset is, I have to show people how smart I am and how good I am. It's all about that external, how people perceive you, right? And it's all about right and wrong, and that idea of perfection, and that idea that you are born with whatever brains you have and you can't change it. So you have to constantly reassure yourself and the people around you that, no, I'm okay. I'm smart. I can do this. I don't make mistakes. So whereas, and that keeps you kind of in a box, right? Because then you're not open to learning. You're not open to doing things in a different way. But the thing with mistakes is you have to find the beauty in there, because in every mistake, there's a gift. There's a gift and there's an opportunity for you to do something different, for you to learn something. And that's part of that growth mindset, right? Is about being open to learn and being able to improve and continue to better yourself, because everybody changes. And if you don't change up, you're going to change down, and you don't want to go down. And while making mistakes might feel like you're changing down, you're actually, if you're taking your mistakes and you're learning from them and you're implementing new things, you're actually learning and you're leveling up. So being able to, and being open to saying, you know what, I made a mistake. Maybe I should have known better. Sometimes we know we should have known better, but we do the best that we can with the information that we have. But then it's about, what can I do differently? And getting on that learning curve. And what is the opportunity for me moving forward that's going to help me to do better next time?
I think this is really profound. Every mistake is a gift. So thank you for sharing that. And Alexandra,
you're welcome.
Thank you, Alexandra, for your time, for being here and sharing with us your story and how you are implementing taking control of your own life. Thank you for sharing with the audience here. I hope the audience really enjoyed whatever you shared. Is there anything you would like to share before we end the session?
I think that we are all way more powerful than we give ourselves credit for. We have so much more ability than we think we do, if we would just trust ourselves a little bit more and believe in ourselves a little bit more. My mentor always says, trust in your ability to figure things out. And no matter what the situation is, we always figure it out. We've survived all kinds of different things. We've overcome all kinds of different mistakes. And it's that ability to figure things out that keeps us moving forward. So that would be my last thing, is just believe in yourself, trust in yourself, and you'll figure it out. And making mistakes is not the end of the world. It happens. It happens. So that would be my last hurrah.
Thank you. I hope it inspires people to make more mistakes and live their life, find their own way. If you have survived all the bad days till now, you are certainly going to make it. So as Alexandra just said. And thank you so much, Alexandra, for being here and sharing so much knowledge with us. I'll share all your links in the description box of the podcast as well as the video cast. So anyone who would like to download the freebie or get in connection with you, they can go to the link and just go to your website and follow you. I'll share all your channels there. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Do let us know in the comment box how it was, what you liked, what you didn't like, if there is anything. Please let us know. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. We'll try to answer you back. And do subscribe to the channel, and so that every week when we are bringing in experts, you can get the notifications. Thank you. I'll see you next week with another amazing expert. Till then, keep smiling and keep shining. It's me, Pratishtha.